I am sitting here with Chief Charles Taku, and I just want to share with you that this is one of the highlights of my, should I say, career or life. And I don't want to be over effusive here, but truly, Chief, this is a privilege for me. We're sitting here in beautiful Bowie Town Center having a cup of coffee with Chief Charles Taku, and I can't, I'm lost for words now. So let me just say thank you so much for sitting down to have a conversation with me. I think I just want to sit and listen to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awesome. It's my pleasure to meet you. And in all humility, I think it was my desire to meet you. The moment I heard you, interview over the Voice of America, it is not always the case to hear someone of African origin, most important, somebody of Southern Cameroon origin, articulate our problem, the problem of the Southern Cameroons and the African problems the way you did. Additionally, I also had the honor to have got a copy of your recent book, Unravel. I read through the book. I read through the book because I heard you over the Voice of America, and I wanted to find out whether the person I listened in the interview, the person again is in this book. Who wrote this book, and I was really, really happy when I found the opportunity for us to meet, take a cup of coffee together, and discuss the common problems that are articulated in the book. Some of them which are very promotionary. You lay out, it's not fiction. It is about not just about yourself. It's about our communities. It's about our people. It's about Africa. It's about the world. I'm extremely, very, very happy and glad to be with you today.
Pleasure's all mine, Chief. So by the way, shameless promotion. I am the beneficiary of Chief Taku's endorsement on my book here, Unravel, which I received that on March 8th. Chief chose the anniversary of the loss of a dear friend of his.
Dr. Batibisong.
Yes. As he mentioned to me that each year he dedicates that day to leave a tribute for a dear friend, and for the first time breaking with tradition on March 8th, decided to use that auspicious occasion to write a glowing endorsement of my work. So I couldn't be more grateful. As I say, yes, shameless promotion, which I take joyfully and very heartily. But we'll come to this because I think Chief has some reflections on this book, which is not only dear to me. So I wanted to start our casual coffee afternoon by asking you, Chief. It seemed that the world is essentially unraveling. What does that say for what is going on in the global north, particularly the Ukraine-Russian war, and what you see today in most parts in Africa? And for me, I'm really, really focused on the 5-year war in Cameroon. And I really can't wait to hear some of your reflections on that subject, because I think the world is always looking to hear from people like you.
What I can say clearly is that the global north, to call it, had been at a war which is very soul since the Second World War. And you will find that the peace and security architecture that was put in place essentially by the global north after the Second World War was grossly inadequate, and it was also founded on a foundation of injustice, because in 1945 Africa was not a subject of international law. The reality is that the United Nations, as it is, and its peace and security architecture, with its the international justice perspective, which came out of that, did not contemplate Africans as subject of international law. In other words, the democratic foundations, the human rights foundations, and the peace and security foundations they found at that time were clearly written on the humanity of Africans, whom it visualized at that point in time this as slaves, as people who were wards of the crimes against humanity that committed in 1884 by the partition of Africa, by colonial rule, and also all sort of inhuman conduct. You find the genocide in the Congo by King Leopold, extermination of thousands of millions. The question is, has the genocide in the Congo abated? As we sit here, no. Did it ever stop? Was there ever a respite? The answer is no. With colonialism, with the war in the southern Cameroon we talk about, has its criminal foundation rooted in French, British, colonial rule, and neo-colonialism. Has it ever at any point in time? The answer is clearly no. Is there a time that will not have bloodletting on the continent of Africa, engineered by the colonial policies of the global north? The answer is no. Now, when you go to Ukraine, for example, is part of the calamity that was foreseen, foreseeable calamity befalling mankind.
Was it though? Was it actually foreseen?
Of course. For example, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, you had what they call the Cold War on Africa.
Cold War between US and the Soviet Union?
The Soviet bloc.
And the Cold War in Africa.
It was in Africa, that Cold War between the Western, what they call the Western democracies, and the Soviet bloc. Now, it must have been seen as if it was a war from a Nigerian perspective. But no.
It was
irrespective of whether it was the Soviet Union or the Western world, the so-called Western world, let's call it, the reaction, the result on Africa, the humanizing Africans, was the same. The difference was always seen by them in terms of their geographical, the gain they had from it. And therefore, at the moment of talking, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of unfinished business. For example, Ukraine, he left on the territory of Ukraine, the Chernobyl. Whereas Ukraine, per se independent or sovereign state, is not a nuclear power. But he left on his territory, his fate undecided. It was something that, unfinished business, that was waiting to lead the world into a major catastrophe. Besides, the architecture that's called the geostrategic architecture was put in place for the East, the Russian bloc, and the West, NATO. When they collapsed the Soviet Union, NATO had to rethink its strategy. He has to rethink its objectives. But what did you see? You saw the NATO bombardment of Yugoslavia and destroyed most of the countries in the Balkans. You had to see NATO bombardment of Libya on the African continent. And back in the African continent, when we were at the Special Court for Sierra Leone, in the case of the Revolutionary United Front for Sierra Leone, there was a lead counsel in that case. We found out at the airport in Meburoka in Sierra Leone, an airport where arms were airlifted by mercenaries to help, for the Revolutionary United Front for Sierra Leone. And
where did these arms come from?
Of course, they were by Ukrainian mercenaries. In the battlefields in the Congo.
Leone.
Yes, in Congo. The battlefield
I always
in Congo.
thought it was Russian mercenaries on the continent, not Ukrainians.
No, there are Russian mercenaries. There are Ukrainian mercenaries. There were the British mercenaries in Sierra Leone called Sideline, fighting in the war. South African mercenaries called Executive Outcome. And as I'm written and argued in the ICC interventions in African conflict, it is not that the ICC not intervene where there's criminality, but the problem is that the reach was not enough. For example, the arms that are being used to prosecute by criminal regimes, dictatorship, to exterminate African masses, like what the arms being used to exterminate Southern Cameroon Ambazonians today. Where do the arms come from? From France? From China? Because these people, this country, these criminal proxy regimes on the continent, they do not manufacture arms. And therefore, in order to stop the peripheral arms, or the wars or the bloodletting on the continent, you must be able to investigate, to see the criminals who are supplying the arms to these regimes and boarding them to kill their people. And why do they kill their people in the first place? Who gains from the crimes of exterminating Southern Cameroonians, committing genocide? It is the countries that are benefiting from the resources, mineral resources. The annexation and colonization of the Southern Cameroon will never have occurred, but for the natural resources of Southern Cameroons. And who benefits from this? That is the question that you have to ask. And that's why I keep on hastening to come before the questions come. When I read your book, I was pleasantly surprised. Of course, it is not fiction. You're writing your own observation, your own perspective, and I found that although not necessary in this context, but you're able to challenge the ghost of colonialism, that has enslaved the proxy regime, which are governing other France-Afrique countries like Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon, and others. So the global north, as you see, when it comes to enslaving, killing, maiming Africa, and stealing the resources of Africa. The objectives are the same. The goals are the same. Indeed, they unite in the way that they hardly challenge each other's hegemony. But when Russia dare challenge what was considered the hegemony in Ukraine, in Syria, in other places, they're up in arms. But the same has been going on in Africa, many other countries in Africa. And you and me, as Southern Cameroonians, it is worse. Because we are the guinea pigs of the global north and their imperialism, colonialism, and their own perception of international law, international human rights law, which is so skewed to protect criminal conduct when it is being done by their agents, because we were not object of international law, and we are still not, in their perspective, object of international law.
Even as we are members of the same club of good boys called United Nations, we're still not object of international law.